Hello, welcome to everybody who is joining us and who might watch this video at a later stage. It's actually Halloween today, and I can promise you we have no tricks today, only treats with the wonderful Lloyd Roden. Lloyd is from Lloyd Roden Consultancy, who are an accredited training provider for many modules within the ISTQB Certified Tester Scheme, including the Certified Tester Foundation Level version 4.0, which is the latest release of the foundation level. Lloyd's going to talk about estimation techniques, which are actually part of the syllabus. So I'm not going to take up much more time. Pass over to Lloyd. If I can quickly say, any questions, please pop into the comments on whichever of the social media streams you're watching through, live watching. And I know Lloyd will be delighted to answer your questions at the end. So Lloyd, over to you, and thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you to ISTQB for making this presentation possible, and it's great to be with you, and thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to listen to this. I'm just going to put on the PowerPoint now so you can see this. I've called this Test Estimation Made Easy. I've been in the industry now for over 40 years, and when I was a test manager, this was one of the hardest things I had to do as a test manager. It was not an easy task to estimate testing, and often the estimates were halved. And if I knew what I knew now, back then, I would do things very, very differently. So what I'm going to share with you is some ideas. We're going to have a look at the 4 estimation techniques that are mentioned in the new foundation syllabus. And I'm also going to challenge you, challenge your thoughts about test estimation, and for you to do something a little bit different, having listened to this presentation. So this is the structure of the presentation. We have a little bit of introduction about estimation in general, and why we find it so difficult at times. And then I'm going to go into the estimation techniques that I mentioned in the syllabus and how they can really help us. I have to be honest with you that when I first saw the foundation syllabus, when it first came out, I was just a little unhappy with the way things had changed. But now I've changed my materials to the new syllabus and gone through it. I think it's excellent. And I think some of the things that they've put in this new syllabus is absolutely fantastic. So I changed my tune, as it were, when I was putting my materials together, and thought, yeah, they've done a good job here. So a little bit of introduction about estimation and why it goes wrong. Okay, so when we have that word estimate, okay, if we take it as what it means, the definition of the word estimate is this: it's an approximation based on judgment or professional understanding of an expert. So there's a key word here that people often miss. It's an approximation. It's an approximate calculation. Now, when in our projects and when in our sprint teams in the agile world, managers come to us and say, give me a rough idea of how long this is going to take. Give me an estimate. What they're really after is a quote. Okay, now a quote is very different, and we'll have a look at these terms a little bit in a moment. But a quote is a proposed cost submitted by a contractor. It's fixed price. This is what it's going to cost you regardless. So when our managers, when our ask us for an estimate and we give them an estimate, then it's taken as a quote, and then that's put into stone. Okay, so we can't change it. You said it's going to be this long, so therefore that's what's in the schedule, if you're lucky. If you're not so lucky, your estimate is usually halved. Okay, so it becomes a target. Okay, so with all the will in the world, we now are faced with not knowing all of the aspects with regards to the project when we're giving this estimate. And we then use our skills and abilities to try to meet the deadline, try to aim at that target. Okay, so that's the first problem. Okay, now, one of the aspects that fascinate me is that estimation is all around us. Okay, we estimate every time we go on journeys, how long is it going to take us to get to X? And we base it upon historical information that's in our brains. You know, last time it took us this long, this time it's going to take us this long. We might even use things like weather, terrain, or, you know, the time of day we're going, and adjust our estimate accordingly. I'm going down to Southampton on Thursday, and I'm going to catch a ferry across the Isle of Wight. And we've done that trip many, many times before, and it roughly takes us about 2.5 to 3 hours. But it has taken us 6 hours because the M25 was jammed solid. I've not done it in less than 2.5 hours, because if I did, then I'll be breaking the speed limit. So, but I have done it in 2.5 hours. So that's based upon historical understanding. Sat-navs, these are incredible bits of ingenious technology, because these things constantly estimate and re-estimate based upon traffic conditions. And it's fascinating to see if you're in traffic and there's travel up ahead, or there's traffic jams up ahead. You can immediately see these with the modern sat-navs we've got in our cars, and it will re-estimate on our target, our destination, of how long it will take. When we travel on aircraft, we probably don't know this, but when we travel on aircraft and they give us a flight time when it leaves and an end time when it lands, that's an estimate. And, you know, there's sometimes that the planes are delayed. I was on one flight actually where the plane took off early and we landed early. Only one flight I've been on. And the pilot said, everyone's on board, we might as well leave, we've got a window slot, let's go. So occasionally that's the case, but it is an estimate at the end of the day. When you get builders in to do work for you, they often give you an estimate to start with, and then they go and, you know, break it down and do the sort of the detail as to how long things are going to take, and then they ultimately give you a quote. Dinner parties. I love cooking. That's one of my hobbies. And I'm often doing dinner parties, and, you know, basically I will estimate how long a particular meal is going to take me, and then I'll work back. It's a fantastic project management aspect, you know, when you're cooking dinner parties, having to get everything together at the right time. And I love that. Okay, you know, just around the corner to us, we've got some roadworks going ahead, and it's been going ahead now for the last 3 months. And it said, the sign said, work will commence here in the summer of 2023 and will finish in the spring of 2024. And I wonder if we should do our test estimation like it. You know, we're going to finish this in about spring 2024. Gives us a bit of flexibility. So why is it we find estimation so difficult if we encounter estimation all around us in all walks of life? So the first thing I want to say is that estimating testing is no different to estimating any other activity. So hence I've got the picture of the twins on there. I love that, by the way. I was planned, I was a surprise. So, you know, with twins, there's identical twins, you know, no difference in terms of what you can see. I've got twin nephews, and they're getting on for 26 years old now. I still can't tell them apart. it's unbelievable. So with it, when it comes to test estimation, we need to know the tasks. We need to know how long each task is going to take. We need to know our resources, who's going to perform each task. When the task starts, when the task finishes, are there any dependencies between those tasks? Who's the best people are at performing those tasks? And that is no different to estimating testing, to estimating development, to estimating requirement production. But test estimation is very different. If you haven't seen that film, it's called Twins with Arnie Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito. Quite an old film now, but very, very funny. So estimating testing is very different. Okay, we have what's called destabilising dependencies. We are not an island. So one dependency that we never take into consideration. Well, I use that statement there. Most companies don't take this into consideration, is the quality that we are expecting of the software. You know, there is a direct correlation between the effort that we are thinking it's going to take and the quality that is going to be delivered. There's a direct correlation. And yet we give an estimate for the effort, but we don't give an estimate for the quality. And that's one of the challenges I want to leave you with at the end of this presentation. You must estimate the quality as well as the effort that's being delivered. We are dependent on the quantity of the software that's provided. Now, this could be more or it could be less than we expect. So there's been times in my career as a test manager when, you know, the handover from development to testing happens, and it's a Friday afternoon, and the development manager comes around and says, Lloyd, I've got good news for you and a little bit of bad news. And you go, okay, what's the good news? And they say, we're handing the software to you. Great. What's the bad news? It's not all there. Now, this happens in traditional, it happens in agile. What do you mean it's not all there? Well, we're going to give phase 1 to you now, and next week we'll give you phase 2. And you say, well, what's in phase 1? And they go, not a lot. Okay, so that's when we get less, and that's going to affect our schedules. Also, we could get more. It's called scope creep. So you're testing away, and then suddenly up comes a feature that you're not expecting. And you say, where did that come from? And you go to the developer and you say, look, this feature, where did that come from? And they go, do you like it? Whether I like it or not, it's immaterial. And they sneak things in unbeknown to us. Now, hopefully this shouldn't happen, but it does. Little things get snuck in into the software. And don't get me wrong, their heart is in the right place, but we don't have any tests for that extra work. So we could get more than we expect, and therefore that will affect our effort. The time. We're always in this squeeze. I call it the testing squeeze. We're always in this period of time where the deadline cannot move, and suddenly our period of time for testing gets squeezed, whether that's in traditional or whether that's in agile. You know, we're expecting a week of system testing and we only get a day. So I've got some hints and tips about what to do when you've got fixed targets and you've got this squeeze. And then the availability of our environments. Environment, I believe, for testing is often the weakest link in the chain. We don't spend long enough with the good quality test environments, the hardware, the software, the data, the tools. And we limp from one project to another with this poor, unrealistic, out-of-date environment. And how can we expect testing to succeed when we've got a poor environment to work in? And the availability of that environment, it could be that, you know, other people need it to do debugging or backups are being done. So we're often tearing our hair out because, you know, it's made difficult from things that are outside of our control. Okay, but I've got some good news. This is all bad news at the moment. I've got some good news. Okay, there are two major problems with test estimation as I see it. Now, I've got a definition there of a myth. A myth is a popular belief or story, fiction or half-truth, that has become associated with a person, institution, or occurrence, especially one considered to illustrate a cultural ideal, a made-up story that seems believable. Now, we as humans, we've been brought up with myths from our parents and grandparents. So my mother used to tell me, if you watch too much telly, you'll get square eyes. Don't forget to eat all of your carrots because you can see in the dark. Now, those are sometimes lies, or they're half-truths, like the carrots is a half-truth. Carrots have got a source of vitamin A, which helps the pupils dilate. It doesn't give us infrared vision. Okay, so that's where it's a half-truth. So what has this got to do with testing? Well, fact. Estimating is based on two aspects: the effort, the amount of days, hours we need to do a piece of work, and the resource. So when we have those two together, it gives us an elapsed period of time, a schedule. So if I've got 5 days effort and 1 person, then as a minimum, I need 5 elapsed days. If I've got 5 days effort and 5 people, then as a minimum, we need 1 day. It might be slightly more if we can't do parallel tasks. But you see the aspect there. So effort and resource equals schedule, but it's a half-truth for testing. You see, that effort that we give when it comes to testing relates directly to the quality of the software that we receive. So we've got to estimate the quality alongside the effort to make any sense of that effort. Now, some of you might be saying, well, how do I estimate quality? You know, how many defects are we likely to find? I haven't a clue. Guess, okay, guess. 20. Or use historical data. On the last project, we found 30, and it's a similar size project. Nothing's changed, so we're going to find 30. Why don't we use story points if you're in Agile? So a story point relates to the complexity of that story or the size of that story. So if I've allocated 1 story point for a particular piece of work, then I could say, well, in that 1 story point, I'm going to find 1 defect. I've allocated 13 story points, we're going to find 13 story points. Now, if people have a problem with this, and they say, where did you get that figure from? It's made up. Then ask them what they think. So it's not going to be 0. Let me tell you that. From 40 years of IT work, it's not going to be 0. So you tell me what you would like me to put into this quality effort. And I'm then going to monitor it. And that's the key, is that we monitor the quality. Because if we think 5 days, and in that 5 days, we're not going to find any more than 10 bugs, and in the first day, we've found 15 bugs, we're in trouble. Okay? But it's not our fault. We're the ones that just find them. So we must also estimate the quality, the number, the severity of the bugs that we're going to find potentially, and monitor to make that effort estimate meaningful. Okay, so that's my first challenge to you. Estimate the quality. The second problem is managers don't get it. Now, when I say that, I use it in a generic term. Okay, so let me give you a for instance here. Let's imagine that I've been tasked to estimate how long is it going to take to test a particular piece of software. And I sit down and I use all these nice estimation techniques that we're going to have a look at in a moment. And I say to my manager, it's going to be 4 weeks with my team. So there's my 4 weeks. Now, in those 4 weeks, what am I doing? I'm testing. Okay, so your manager starts to think 4 weeks, that's really not going to fit. That's really not going to fit with, my timescales here. I have a better idea. I'm going to cut you in half. You see, in those 2 weeks, we're testing. Okay, in those 2 weeks, we're testing. It's the same. Before, we were doing 4 weeks testing. Now we're doing 2 weeks testing. Now, look what I did there, because in those 4 weeks, I am providing the platinum service. Okay. Now, we all get what bronze, silver, gold, and platinum services are because we get special privileges. Pre-pandemic, I used to travel all over the world, mainly in Norway, but usually all over the world. And I clocked up, VIP status in the Radisson Hotel. I clocked up silver card status with British Airways. And I know with those cards, with the VIP status and the silver, I got privileges. Now, I tell you now, I got an email from British Airways about a year ago saying, dear Mr. Roden, we haven't seen you for some time. We're truly sorry, but we're now downgrading you to a blue card. Now, let me tell you now, blue card holders get nothing, okay? And similarly with the Radisson, I'm no longer a VIP, okay? Now, look what I've done as well. In that platinum service, we are going to find 80 bugs, okay? Because This guy called Lloyd Roden has said, I should estimate the effort and the quality. So there you go, platinum service, $80. But your manager thinks 4 weeks is not permissible. We don't have the time. Therefore, you're getting 2 weeks. And we then, in the past, I've argued and argued with management about this. What do you mean you're cutting me in half? I need these 4 weeks and blah, 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 blah. I wouldn't do it anymore. I would go to my manager and say, okay, 2 weeks, but now you're getting the silver card. You're getting the silver service, not the platinum service, okay? But he says, no, 1 week's not good enough either. 2 weeks not good enough. 1 week, you're only getting 1 week. Okay, so, okay, we'll take 1 week, but now you're getting the bronze. You're not getting the platinum. You're not even getting the silver. And they say, well, what's in the bronze service? And you go, not a lot, because we've only got 1 week. But I would also have something else to say. What about the other 60 bugs that we were going to find if you'd have given us what we asked for? 4 weeks. They're going to go to the customer. And going out into production is likely to cost us more. Now, if you are happy with that, then go for it. And I would no longer argue that I need 4 weeks. You see, we need to recognize that we can test in less, but quality will be reduced. It will be reduced. I want to give you a couple of little stories to impress upon you this concept of we can test in less. I'm sitting in my office at the moment and looking out in my garden, and there is a long fence that is there. And we moved into this house in 1997 in the September, and our garden was basically full of massive conifer trees. And so in the September when we moved in, we said, oh, let's chop down some of these conifer trees because they're blocking all the light. And so we did. We got somebody in and chopped them all down. And unbeknown to us, these conifer trees were holding up the fence. And on Christmas Eve in 1997, I was putting my children to bed and we heard this almighty crash and the whole fence had fallen over. Now, on the back of the fence is a path. And so fortunately, it didn't hit anyone on the path. So in January, we got a guy out to measure up and give us a quote. And this is back in 1997 now. Okay, so it's a long time ago. And he came up and measured up and he turned around and he said, it's going to cost you £1,000. I nearly fell off my chair. And I just said to him, what? My first house was only 19,000. This is a fence. And I said to him, surely you can do it for less. And he looked at me and said, no. And then he wrote down on a piece of paper a phone number and a name. And he said, I can't do it for less, but this guy can. Very bold statement, because he then turned around and said, I can guarantee my fence will be still standing in 30 years' time. I can't guarantee this guy's will. And so we went for it. We went for his offer, and I'm sitting looking at our fence still standing all those years later. And then this one here, just this is fascinating. Okay, this is a fascinating story to do with our kitchen. My wife wanted a new kitchen, and so we got a guy out to measure up. And before he came round, I said to my wife, I said, you know, roughly how much do you think it's going to be? And she said, oh, it'll be about £5,000. I said, dream on. I said, it's more like 10,000. So she said, no, it won't be that much. So he came round, he measured up, and he said, we want this, and we want this, and we want this, and we want an induction hob, and we want black sink, and, you know, and he said, okay, leave it with me, I'll give you a quote. And I said, oh, before you go, could you give me a rough estimate on what it's going to cost? And he said, well, looking at all these, what you want, he said, I think it'll be about £6,000. And I looked across at my wife and she was looking at me. And if you're with partner where you know the look, don't you? She had a big smile on her face as if to say, told you so. And I thought, oh, okay. He went away, and 2 days later he came knocking at the door and he said, Mr. Roden, he said, can I come in? And that's always a bad sign. So I said, yeah, come in. And he had an envelope, sealed envelope. He said, your quote's here. Made him a coffee and I opened up the envelope and I couldn't believe. I looked down and it was £9,500. And I passed it to my wife and now I had the smile on my face. And but what he said next was incredible. He said, Mr. Roden, I got it wrong. He said, I didn't take into account this, this, and this, but I can give you a new kitchen for £6,000. And I went, oh. And then he said, if you don't have the integral microwave, if you don't have the induction hob, if you go for a normal stainless steel sink rather than a black sink, if. And what he was saying is I can do it in less if you get less quality. And to cut a long story short, my wife wasn't having any of it. So we got the kitchen that she wanted. Okay, so we can test in less, but quality will be reduced. And you know, we've got some organizational and project factors for estimates we have to take into consideration. You know, the required level of quality that is wanted by our business. And you know, if you say to them, what level of quality do you want? They'll say perfection. And perfection comes with a price. Okay, so that's all well and good, but there's a huge price tag associated with perfection. And if you don't believe me, talk to people that work in the safety critical industries. Okay, huge price tag in what they do in terms of testing. Do we have historical data? What about tools in place? What about the complexity and the size of the system to be tested? And all of these aspects are taken into account when we use those four techniques that are mentioned in the foundation syllabus. Some other aspects that we need to take into consideration as well, the attitude of senior management and their expectations. I remember it was a Friday afternoon and I was just about to go home and my CEO came down and he said, Lloyd, I'm glad I caught you. Okay, this was 15 minutes before I was going home. And he said, I need an estimate for your team in terms of testing of the next project. And I said to him, Sandy, I'm going home in 15 minutes. He said, I need it 9 o'clock Monday morning. And I said, okay, I'll work on it over the weekend. I'll get it to your desk on Monday morning. I said, what is the next project? And he looked at me and he said, we don't yet know. It's a bit like me saying to you, so how long is it going to take you to get there? And you go, where? And you go, there. And you go, where's there? And you go, anywhere. Just give me a number. That's what he was saying. Just give me a number. So I did. I said to him, 2 years. He then said, don't be silly, Lloyd. I don't think I was the silly one in that one. We also need to take into consideration the skills and experience of people working on the project, the staff, and that could be testers, that could be developers. When certain developers used to work on projects, my estimate would increase because the number of bugs they would put in also increased. You know, they weren't as good as other developers. And similarly with testers, some are novice testers, some are experienced testers. Geographical factors, communication, all of that comes into play when we have test estimation. And also we live in a world of optimism, don't we? We always think the next project's going to be the best. It's all going to go through smoothly. Nothing's going to happen. We're not going to find many defects. Yeah, okay, I've heard that before. Okay, and we do live in an optimism disease. You know, when I travel down to Southampton, I'm always tend to be fairly optimistic and say to my wife, I think it would be 2.5 hours. She said, that's not the realistic figure, is it? I said, well, we've done it in 2.5 hours before. Let's do more realistic. 3.5 is probably more akin to what it's going to take us. So, and there are other aspects to take into consideration. So I've given you a couple of challenges to do with estimation in general, and now we're getting on to the techniques that are mentioned in the new foundation syllabus. Okay, and I have to say that initially I thought, this is overly complex. You know, this is more like test management. And after looking at the whole of the foundation syllabus now, I can see some reasons why they've included these, and I think it's great that they've included these four. I think they're the four most popular estimation techniques. Okay, so the first one is known as ratio-based, or some people call it historical estimation, hence Stonehenge there. Okay, by the way, that's historical estimation, not hysterical estimation. That is a completely different estimation technique. Okay, you want it by when? Then there's something called extrapolation. This is where we use trend analysis, and we do this all the time in Agile, because if you're using burn down charts, then we're extrapolating that burn down chart to say, if we don't do anything different, then this is what's going to happen. And you can extrapolate the information and re-estimate based upon that. Okay. There's Wideband Delphi. Now, I have to say, it's not a phrase that I come across constantly. I used to call this the consensus of experts. Okay, it's taking lots of people's views into consideration, which is like planning poker, to be honest, and then taking sort of averages. And then one that I really like, it's the missing jigsaw puzzle for me. When I came across this many years ago, I just thought, I wish I'd have had this in my armory, when doing this test estimation. Okay, and it gives us the optimistic, the realistic, and the pessimistic views, and taking averages on that. Now, the ones on the left, ratio-based and extrapolation, are deemed to be metric-based. So we're using previous history, we're using previous information, and we're using previous trend analysis to work out what it's going to be, metrics. Whereas these tend to be more people-based, expert-based, where we're saying, okay, what do we think it's going to be? What do we think the optimistic view is? And it's almost like guesswork, okay? But sometimes using historical data in our heads. Okay. So let's have a look at the first one, ratio-based. We're using historical metrics to produce a ratio for test effort. And we're almost saying, okay, well, if this is what it took last time and the project is a similar size, then we estimate it's going to be this time. Okay, so example one, iteration one, development to test effort was 3:2. So we use the same ratio, 3:2. Okay, it took developers 3 hours, it took us 2 hours to do the testing. Therefore, this project, we're going to use the same ratio. So developers, what do you think? And therefore, we will actually have 2/3 of that. Okay. Alternatives, I use this a lot in my day as a test manager. Percentages. I used to use percentage of development effort for testing. Okay, so last project size was X, equals 50 days. This project size is 2 times X, so we're going to use 100 days, as a sort of an example. And we might say, well, okay, developers, what did you use? Now, I will mention that when I was a test manager and I used the ratio-based estimation, I did not estimate quality, and I should have done. Now we can see that we're saying 40% of development effort, or a 3:2 ratio, but that's got to depend on the quality they're going to deliver to us. Because if the quality was good quality last time and it was a 3:2 ratio, and the quality this time is really poor, it's not going to be 3:2. So that's why we need to estimate the quality at that. And we've got to keep checking to make sure that these ratios and percentages are still relevant, because they can get out of date. It's like, 15 years ago, we used 40%, and so we're still using 40%. So we've got to go back and say, okay, is 40% still applicable? Is 3:2 still applicable? Now, extrapolation estimates, it's gathering metrics, but we want to look at trends. Okay, we're formulating trends on what this is going to be over this period of time. And so burn down charts is a tremendous example of extrapolation, because in Agile, we start to plot what we've planned to do, we've estimated using planning poker, and then we plot our burn down charts, and this is what we plan to do, or this is our linear plan, the blue line, and then the actual is overlaid on top. Now, as the actuals are starting, you can see that orange line that to start with, it looked okay for the first couple of days, and then we really slowed down. Maybe that's because people were off sick with COVID or something, and then they came back to work and they were really, so it started a steep line there. We were back on track, and then over the last 5 days, we've had very little progress being made, and until a day before, when suddenly the line has shot down. It's gone downwards. Now, in terms of extrapolation, if I want to present when we're going to finish, how long is it going to take, then we take the first point of the orange, right at the start there at 0, and we take the end point of the orange, and then you draw a line and extend it, and that will extrapolate when you're going to finish. And this is used all the time in Agile to try and get us back on track. And then we use this information later on in the retrospectives to see if we want to improve our estimation. And maybe when we estimated with planning poker, we got it wrong. This story I said was a 2. Oh my word, that was a grossly underestimation for that, because it took us a lot longer than we anticipated. And you clock it in your heads, and you go, okay, last time I thought this was a 2, I'm going to be a little bit more prepared next time, and I think this is now more of a 5 in terms of estimating the user stories. Now, Wideband Delphi, expert-based technique, group of people independently estimate the effort. We use this an awful lot in Agile with planning poker, if you're using planning poker. When I first started investigating Agile, probably about 18, 20 years ago, I was very skeptical about planning poker. And then when I come to actually use it myself, I thought, actually, this is really good. And it gives a sense of confidence when everyone sort of agrees that, yeah, I think this is a story point of 5, or I think this is a story point of 13. And it's based upon wisdom of crowds. And if you want to Google this, it is a fascinating white paper. And basically it says, the more people we have estimate anything, if we then take the average is around 0.5% to the actual number. It is an incredible white paper. So the more people we get, so we get these really outliers, I call them, sort of idiotic estimates. How long is it going to take you to get to Southampton by car, from Peterborough? Oh, I think it's going to be a minute. Okay, ridiculous. And someone says, I think it's going to be a week. Okay, so you get the outliers, but then majority of us, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, and it's in the middle, and it's about 0.5% close to the actual number. Now, if you've used planning poker before, you know that there are various scales. Okay, Fibonacci is 1 plus 2 is 3, 3 plus 2 is 5, 5 plus 3 is 8, and you add the two numbers together to give the next number. Binary sometimes is used, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. If you want to know why Fibonacci is more popular and better, Mike Cohn from the Agile community has written a great white paper on why we should use Fibonacci. Okay, now the problem with these numbers is that we often take them as days or hours, and it was never intended to be days or hours. It was meant to be the size, the complexity of a user story. So that's why t-shirt sizes is sometimes used. Okay, t-shirt sizes, extra small, small, medium, large, etc. And therefore we say that's a large user story, that's a medium, that's a extra large, etc. Okay, so the problem with t-shirt sizes I can't do anything with those values. At least with numbers, we can start to plot them, okay, and add them together. So it's very, very useful, and I would thoroughly recommend encouraging using this. gain a consensus of what you think it's going to be, and involve the whole team as well, involve others to estimate with you. T-shirt size is really, I'm going to be politically incorrect now, I'm sorry, but T-shirt sizes are very different in different countries, okay? And I went to Thailand on holiday some years ago, and I'm a massive James Bond fan. In fact, I've just decorated my office, and all my James Bond memorabilia is now in a box up in the attic. But I'm a huge James Bond fan. When we went to Phuket, I said we've got to go to the Phuket island that James Bond was filmed, Man with a Golden Gun, and we did. And we travelled out there, and there was all this sort of touristy stuff about James Bond and that. And there was one place where they were selling T-shirts, little singlets, and it just said, "I've been to the James Bond island." And I said to my wife, I said, "I want one of those T-shirts." And so this little Thai lady was serving, and I said, "I'd like a T-shirt, please." She said, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, large." And she went, "Nah." I said, "Oh, a large, please." She said, "No, you need extra, 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 extra large." I said, "Flipping cheek." I said, "No, I'm a large." She said, "No, you're extra, 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 extra large." So I argued with her, and I said, "Please, I'd like a large." And so she literally threw this T-shirt at me, which was a large. And I said to her, "So can I try it on?" And she went, "Yeah." Oh my word, when I tried this large on, it was definitely not large. I would have said it was an extra, extra, extra small. Oh my word, it was so tight. It was like a crop top on me. And so she said, "Yeah, you need extra, 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 extra large." And so I tried that on, and it fit perfectly. So just be careful on the T-shirt size front, okay, about what people think a large is or a small, okay. Now, 3-point analysis. This is the missing jigsaw for me. I used to do work breakdown structures, and I use that a lot in my estimation techniques, and breaking things down to the lowest level and then sort of bringing it back up is sometimes called microestimation. And when I was introduced to 3-point analysis, I thought, I should have used this for my work breakdown structure. And so what we do is we have an optimistic view, okay? And the syllabus says, call this little a. Best case scenario, when nothing goes wrong, all the conditions are as it should be, okay? How long is it going to take you to get to Southampton? Well, the best, most optimistic view is 2.5 hours, okay? What's most likely? The most likely duration, the realistic, some people, what you expect? Well, I think it will be 3.5 hours to get to Southampton. What's your worst case scenario? That was 5 hours, okay, when things go wrong. And what we do is we have a formulae, and the syllabus uses this as a common formula. And you say your estimate is your optimistic plus 4 times realistic plus pessimistic divided by 6. And then you can work out standard deviation. And standard deviation is your most pessimistic minus your optimistic divided by 6. And then your final estimate is your estimate plus or minus your standard deviation. Okay, now I hope I'm not losing you here because this is statistics. So an example, you think your most optimistic is 6 hours. Okay, your realistic is 9 hours, your pessimistic is 18 hours. So your effort, or your sort of estimate for your effort is 6 plus 4 times 9 plus 18 divided by 6, which is 10 hours. So you're saying the average there is 10 hours, and then your standard deviation is 18 minus 6 divided by 6, which is 2. So your final estimate of your managers is it's 10 hours plus or minus 2 hours, give or take. And what this does is it uses statistics in the background, which is, I'm really passionate about statistics. I did that as part of my degree course. And we can sort of help people understand things by using things like averages, standard deviation, means, medians, and bringing that into the equation. Now, if you want, I've got this spreadsheet given to me some years ago by Lichtenberg, and it's got some macros in the background. And again, it uses this 3-point estimation, and you put your activities down, you put your optimistic in hours, your realistic, your pessimistic. It actually works out your standard deviation within there, and it then tells you what your confidence rating in that estimation. Because with standard deviation, we have what's called percentiles. We have a 97% percentile, we have an 84, we have a 68, we have a 95%. So it's to do with the confidence with that particular number. If you'd like a copy of that spreadsheet, then just send Debbie Iski an email, and I'll send it to them, and they can make it available to you. So I hope you get excited about these 4 techniques in the foundation. They are 2 of them are new; they weren't there before, and I think they've done a good job with having those 4 estimation, giving you a broad brushstroke on how to use these techniques powerfully. But please, 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 please also estimate quality, and always remember that if you are cut in half, then we can always test in less, but the quality will be reduced. So in conclusion, I have some paradoxes for you, okay? The more bugs we find, the more testing we need to do. Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, if we're finding loads of bugs, then we need to do more testing. But the more bugs we find, the more time we spend raising bug reports. Hence, we do less testing. That's interesting, isn't it? The more bugs we find, we should do more testing. But the more bugs we find, we're actually raising more bug reports, which takes us away from testing. So we do less testing. The earlier we estimate testing, the greater the impact, but the lower our confidence. The later we estimate, the higher our confidence, but the lower the impact. Okay, let's go back to my trip down to Southampton. So I think it's going to take 3 hours. Okay, I set off, I put my sat-nav on. Sat-nav's telling me there's some roadworks, and the sat-nav's indicating that it's going to be 3.5 hours. The sat-nav then diverts me to another place, and it cuts it back again. And all the while, our confidence at the start of that was very low at that journey. And as we're going along, as the sat-nav is re-estimating, as we go further and further on the journey, our confidence gets more and more in what it's telling us. And we're a mile away from our destination, and it says you will arrive in 5 minutes. Your confidence in that is at its highest because we're almost there. So, but in order to plan, our managers need the estimates early. And that's why sometimes they're taken as a quote. I went on a seminar once on estimates in general. And one of the things I took away from this person was the fact that estimates are much more accurate if you've done the work before. And that's in all walks of life. If you ask a builder to come around and measure up and see how much it's going to be to put a wall in front of your house, and that builder has done that before on other houses, then what he quotes is going to be fairly close to what it will be. But if that builder is new and never done it before, then they're not going to be that accurate to start with. So my view here is that most of the estimates are done by those that are not doing the work, but managing the process. And I'll tell you, my estimation skills increased immensely when I started to test myself. I used to give tasks to my team, and I'm not proud of this, but this is what I used to do. I used to wait till them when they went to lunch, and then they'd all gone, and then I used to go around and put on their desks their task specs for that day or that week. And I used to then have my head down, and I'd suddenly hear them come back from lunch, and then I'd hear them say, "What? A day? You've got to be ridiculous." And they used to come to me and say, Lloyd, this is not going to be a day's work. This is going to be a week's work. And I'm like, oh, no, you can fit it in a day, can't you? No, we can't. And I used to have this disagreement with them. And I started then to realize I needed to do the work myself. And as soon as I started doing testing, as soon as I started doing automation, as soon as I started building environments, I knew that wasn't a day, that was a week. So my estimation skills improved by doing the work myself as well. So here's some solutions for you to finish this session. Estimation is accurate if the work is done before. So test managers out there, you have got to test, okay? Not just manage the process. Even if it's 1 hour a week, roll your sleeves up and test the software, okay? Very important. Another one, remember to estimate effort and quality to make any sense of your effort figure. Otherwise, your estimate has no context whatsoever. Okay, then to monitor and report on actual versus expected quality. That's another story. So that's the next stage of this. Estimate the quality, then monitor the quality and report on that to management. Consider a simple method to use. You know, it's going to be this, and you're going to get the platinum service, and they cut you in half, and you say, well, okay, now you're now getting the silver service. They get it. Managers understand that terminology. And, you know, it's something we can impart to them and drip feed to them. Try to negotiate, absolutely, but not for too long. Life is too short. And I'm learning that as the older I get, life is too short, okay? But we can always test in less. However, we need to report on the consequences. One of the things I suggest doing is you know, we can test in less, but you know, we're going to find less defects. Those extra 60 defects are likely to go to the customer. And then if we've got other figures we can work with, we can then turn around and say, but if you let us test it here, it's going to cost you this. But if you go into production, we know production costs are a lot more, so it's going to cost you this, and leave it with them. I hope this has given you some thought. I hope this has challenged you. Whenever I present, I just like people to go away with some challenging ideas and thoughts, rather than just sort of nod. You may not have agreed with all I said, but that's okay, as long as it's not violent. I'm happy. But I hope you've enjoyed this. Please, if you haven't done the foundation course, then do the new foundation syllabus. It is really, really good. We've got a lot of good stuff in there now, which is great. Okay, so I have finished. Yay! Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed that. And Debbie, over to you. Thank you so much for listening, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you, Lloyd. Lots of context there, lots of humour, lots of good examples, and I say a treat for today. We do have some comments here. Let's just quickly whiz through these. So Samita, can you have the spreadsheet? Yes, Samita, what we'll do is I'll message you on LinkedIn, and I'll organise to send that to you. And anybody else who wants it, please do contact me.
Yeah, I'll send that to you straight away, Debbie. Okay.
That's great. Anastasia, apologies if I've not pronounced that correctly. Should we give test estimation and dev estimation as one value, or is it better to divide it?
Well, personally, I mean, I've been brought up with dividing the estimates and saying, well, this is allocated to, you know, the testing effort. For, you know, it could be just for all of the testing, or it could be for the testing at the system level. The problem I find, if you put it into one and you have one estimate, you'll find that sometimes development just encroach on our time. So suddenly you say, okay, for the whole of this, it's going to be, you know, 10 days. And then 9.5 days later, it says, well, you've got half a day now. So I usually split it for that very reason.
That's good. Murali, thanks. How are we going to estimate the regression time, effort, and number of regression cycles necessary?
Well, this is going back to estimation of quality, because with that quality angle, and we estimate the quality that we're expecting, in that figure is, okay, I'm expecting to find no more than 10 bugs. We can absorb 10 bugs into our test effort. And in those 10 bugs, we'll need to retest those 10 bugs. Okay, so we've absorbed that in. We'll need to regression test those 10 bugs as well. So we've absorbed that in. So if then suddenly within the first day or two, you found 20 bugs, we can then extrapolate that using extrapolation and say, actually, our estimate of 10 bugs was way off. It's more likely to be 60 bugs. And by the way, we need all this extra time for regression and retesting. And debugging as well, and report that back to management. And what I say is that the bugs are the bugs. The weather is the weather. It's not our fault that we're finding more bugs than we anticipated. Okay? We're the ones that are just finding them. We're not the ones that are putting them there. So it's not a problem. It's like a weather forecast person standing up tonight and saying, actually, the weather tomorrow is going to be torrential rain, hurricanes, we're going to have 90-mile-an-hour winds. It's not the weather forecast fault. The weather is the weather. The bugs are the bugs.
Reality. And Murali, again, hidden effort is the one which leads to deviations. How do we consider these review work and rework?
Yeah, in the past, people have done contingencies, so they've put in their figure and then added a little bit of contingency in for, the extra information. And I think going back to 3-point estimates with the standard deviation, that's what it's done there, because it said, well, this is my figure for effort plus or minus the standard deviation. So it's adding in some extra contingency for those unexpected things that might happen.
Quick check with you, Lloyd, before we go on to the next comment here. In the new syllabus, I think estimations covered in, is it 5.1, chapter 5.1.4?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And I think also, if you look at the sample exams, I think there are 4 new sample exams for CTFL 4.0. I think there's an estimation question in each, so people might find it useful to take a look at those. Morton sending you a message here, Lloyd. Nice to see you.
Yeah, hi, Morton. Long time no see.
Christian, thanks for great insight on this challenging subject. Thank you so much, Christian. And Christian, I noticed that you asked about a reminder, and I'll check with the team on that just to see what might have happened there. Maja, thank you so much. Thank you for a great live. Lovely. Thank you. I think we're just about to hit the top of the hour now, so our time is up. Lloyd, as I say, a treat. Always lovely to have you live on the ISTQB channel. And
thank you and the guys at ISTQB for putting this on. You're doing a sterling job with all the work you're doing behind the scenes and supporting this and promoting it. So well done to you guys doing this.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody who's watched. A reminder that we will actually publish this on our YouTube channel, and you can always go back onto the socials as well, where we've been broadcasting. You'll be able to see them. Any questions, just message, and we'll be able to get copies of slides or the spreadsheet and what have you to you. So thank you again, Lloyd.
Okay. Happy Halloween.
Bye all.